When we talk about scale, everything needs to be secure, right? There's 221 million API transactions a day that are occurring.
Dell scale is something to marvel at. When you're operating at that level, security and precision are everything. Now, throw AI into the mix, and it raises some big questions. How credible is the data? How do you ensure it's learning from the best sources out there? In this episode, Jen Felch, the former CDO and CIO of Dell, answers.
How do you think about that at the scale that Dell operates, if you were to draw AI to your customers?
When we talk about GenAI, it really comes down to, I think, some of the fundamentals, which is what is the data that you're using to train it on? And is that data a reliable source of good information in which you want it to learn and then react?
Is AI bringing us closer together or farther apart?
I'm definitely in the coming together part.
For people who weren't very good communicators, they really do have an assistant readily available to make them better communicators, to bring people together. Like, maybe we won't be as misunderstood.
Hello, I'm Anshul, and this is Floating Points, where we talk to the leaders responsible for transforming their organizations with technology and AI. Whether you're a leader, a builder, or someone who just likes good conversations, you're in the right place. Today, I'm in the very hot Round Rock, right outside of Austin, Texas, to chat with Jen Felch, the Chief Information and Chief Digital Officer of Dell Technologies. Dell Technologies helps organizations and individuals build their digital future and transform how they work, live, and play. Dell provides customers with a broad and innovative technology and services portfolio for the data era, including PCs, servers, networking, consulting services, and more. Dell also offers a broad AI solutions portfolio, positioning Dell to help customers accelerate their enterprise AI journeys from initiation to scale. A quick note before we start. This episode with Jen Felch was recorded a few months ago, before Jen stepped down from her impressive career at Dell. Jen and Dell have graciously allowed us to still post this episode, but this serves as a short disclaimer for any references to Dell as Jen's current employer. Enjoy the episode. Jen, welcome to Floating Points.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, just for a way of introduction for the audience, I'm going to try to do my best introduction and you tell me whether it was good or not. So Jen is the Chief Digital Officer and the Chief Information Officer at Dell Technologies, a role that you've had for about 5 years now, but a career at Dell of 20 years or so. So you've seen a lot, and so you've seen IT and operations teams through a number of technological revolutions and transformations, and making sure that Dell's 100K plus workforce is humming along and equipped to operate quickly. And so I am very excited to have you. And how was that for an introduction?
Well, that was a fabulous introduction. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
hopefully that bodes well for the rest of the conversation. But just to set up the Floating Points kind of experience, we'll have 11 sections. And in the spirit of floating point arithmetic, we're going to start at 1,024 seconds. And then we're going to go 512, 256, all the way down to 421. So it'll get more fun maybe as it goes along. But we'll have a journey. It'll get faster for sure. All right, so let's get it started. Okay, so the first topic and the one that's going to be the bulk of the conversation is really, I think, just IT leadership at Dell, because I think Dell by itself is a very unique organization, whether it comes to scale and size, the kinds of technology and the products that you build, the diversity. And there's a lot of unique things to just dive in here. And so I guess to start there, I want to start with the size picture, right? Because as a developer, I know that I always want the shiniest new tool. And I always want to get my hands on something.
Yeah.
But how do you think about balancing, the asks for the sizzle and the next cool tech with the scale of Dell and making sure that things work at scale with process reliably? I think that's an interesting balance that I'd love to get your thoughts on.
Actually, probably every company of every size deals with this, which is, how do we have our systems of record, our production systems that are highly scalable and performant, yet we create opportunities for innovation and experimentation. Tend not to do those things in the same environment, right? Because the whole essence of experimentation is that you're probably going to fail, you'll take some risks. So let's just what we try to do is be really clear about where are we experimenting, where are we looking at things that are new and innovative, let's say a little more risky, and then what are we doing in what we refer to as production. We might test in production, but when things are live, you know, our goal is that they are not only great experiences for our customers and our employees, but they're highly available, they're very performant, and that's kind of not the space to be messing around in, to be honest.
So what does that journey look like? How long is something like in experimentation stage? What does that experimentation stage look like? And then at what point is like, okay, we need to go to production? How is that like switch flipped?
So we probably should separate kind of two different processes that we have at the company. One is for our product groups. And so our product groups, I mean, they do core research. There's a big R&D organization. They develop solutions and they roll them out. Those things could be those could be months, it could be years that they're working on that to come up with innovative solutions that they bring to market. And then within our digital organization, it's a little bit different because we're not selling the solutions. We're, bringing capabilities to this large company, to our customers, to the experiences that they have. So we would operate. I'm smiling a little bit because we might operate a little bit like a startup. Like, you try things with low investment and you assess, like, is it feasible? Are we going to get the kind of, like, will this even work? Right? Will it work? And then if it works, how do we then look at the next level of investment to say, now how do we scale this out? How do we do our A/B testing maybe in one market and then assess that, yep, it's valid. We're seeing the kind of return we expected, and then we'll roll it out more globally. So we might have a slightly different, but still kind of same objectives of experiment, manage your investment, kind of along lines with the kind of
Sure.
experimentation you're doing, and then roll it out.
Yeah, I think that makes complete sense, and it's good to actually separate the product line and
Yeah.
digital side of the business at scale. I guess because coming back to that scale, for like the 100,000 employees, if you're thinking about digital, or that's like a small city in most places in the country. What are those like tenants at scale that like okay, when we're in production, these are the core things that we should thinking about in production, so that this is a service that runs well for our employees, for our customers, whoever it might be.
Um, okay, that's when we think about what does it take for things to be highly performant, right? You go through a set of criterias, and we'll maybe let's separate two different things. We'll take two
Sure.
examples. We'll say, boy, when we're thinking about our employee base, they have individual tools for productivity and then a series of internal applications that we're running that they would all use. The the first thing is that we try to think about the process in which they live so that things are efficient for them, that they have information at their fingertips, they can support customers, they can do their jobs effectively, and then those things are, make sure that they're always available for them. Just with our environment, there's 221 million API transactions a day that are occurring. So when we talk about scale, we talk about number one, everything needs to be secure, right? Security, security, security. And then we look at these need to be highly available. So, when you think about, well, how do you make things highly available? Of course, you design them to be highly available, and then you practice failing over, like practice, practice, practice. So those are some of the tenets of, like, it feels like it's awesome. Why can't you do something just like really quick? You can do it really quick. You just have to figure out how to do it really, really quickly within a structured environment so that you can get the kind of performance that you would expect or the kind of reliability that you would.
That makes sense. So there's the reliability side. And I think the other side, which I'd love to get your thoughts on, because I think that ties a lot into this new AI wave, is the trust aspect, right? Like shipping AI at scale and having people trust the AI. How have you been thinking about that at scale? Because this is like a kind of a new ball game. It's not like, you know, technology, you press a button, it runs kind of deterministically. And there's some amount of randomness in it. So how do you think about that at the scale that Dell operates if you were to draw AI to your customers?
So, okay, so let's talk about, I guess, a few things of how we're using AI, because I think you're talking a lot about sort of Gen AI. So if we think
Sure.
about, right, we've got lots of examples of rules-based systems. I sometimes will joke, like, We've had AI on our website since the beginning of time with CTO, right?
That's a fair correction. Yes.
But when we talk about Gen AI, it really comes down to, I think, some of the fundamentals, which is what is the data that you're using to train it on? And is that data a reliable source of good information in which you want it to learn and then react? That's like the biggest question for large companies. Do we know what we're training our data on so that we can see those results? We have a pretty clever team, I would say. We've built out an AI platform that allows us um, to really modularize the key components of AI, whether we're talking about the databases or the embeddings that we can, that we can capture and create catalogs for, or the different engines that we might use against a given data set and how we might swap that out. And then they monitor not only the prompts that come in, but the results that come out so that we have, basically some insight into of the what are we asking of the AI, and then what are the results that we're getting, and then how do we filter them? Um, it's a little bit like, like when we talk about Gen AI, people are like, oh no, but what if it says the wrong thing? What if it hallucinates? What if it does? What if
The
it?
skeptic, yeah.
They're the same things you would ask of any call center. What if I had someone on the phone that was really upset? What are they going to say? I don't know what they're going to say, right? But what are you going to do? You're going to train them, and you're going to try to have controls in place, and you're going to try to have monitoring in place so that doesn't happen. And we just try to do the same thing, right? We just try to do the same thing.
Right. It's all quality. I think a lot of, well, I mean, a lot of the, of course, news is all about the LLMs and the models. But to your point,
People aren't that predictable either.
yeah,
I
people are
mean,
complicated. I mean, it's always funny. I always say it's like, look, all these Gen AI things, they're trained on the internet, and not everything on the internet is real or true. So it's like there's a data quality
you're
question
kind
at
of
all
crushing,
times.
you're kind of crushing me right now.
I
What do you
know,
mean?
right?
It's not.
I know, right? So everything on Wikipedia
Yeah,
turns out,
yeah, it's
there's
true.
there's
It's true.
not everything out there. But I think there's another part that you kind of mentioned at the beginning where it's like you have digital, you have the product ISG team. There's multiple lines of business within Dell.
Yeah.
And I think that adds just another layer of complexity as an IT leader at a company. So how we talked a little bit about some of the things that you viewed between like product and digital and services and all these different branches. Are there any other kind of like unique aspects of kind of operating as an IT leader with so many different lines of business going on?
Any equipment that we would choose to purchase or put into play, our product groups or services groups, they probably created it, right? Or they have a partnership that involves it. So we have a lot of expertise available to us, not just within our IT organization, but across the whole company. So it is honestly really awesome, because we can do a lot of collaboration together. And we have a nice feedback loop with our development teams in the product groups about what we're learning and what we're doing internally. So I think that's really great. It's probably the kind of relationship most IT leaders would like to have with such kind of strategic partners. There, we all work for the same company, so that is great. One of the other things that we do is that we support a large consumer base, right? Consumers buy laptops, they buy lots of awesome peripherals through Dell.com, through our partners, through the retail channels, and we have an even larger business with corporations. And so when we think about, how do you create digital experiences that appeal to such a spectrum of buyers, right? Like one person on a credit card or through financing to a very large corporation, that that forces us to kind of step back and really look at our process to say how can we standardize it, and how can we productize it so that we can have one solution that works for many. um, Kind of keeps us on our toes.
There's like two threads there that I actually wanted to dive into both of those. And
Okay.
the first one was like, I think not every company gets the luxury that you're building products that you could also use and be the customers of.
You get to do it.
We do get to do that as well a little,
Yeah.
but at the size of Dell, but we're a little bit smaller. I'll say that right now. Are there any examples that you could share? Of course, I don't want to hear like the future and spoil any secrets of Dell's future products, but like in the past where there's been innovation that has happened internally, which end up turning into a product where people are just like building things for themselves.
I would say we do a lot of that collaboratively, whether the problem or the opportunity initiates within digital or it initiates within the product group, then our teams usually come together and say, hey, let's look at how we can do that. We might be trying it first. They might take something that we've created and then go ahead and deploy that, offering that to other customers. Probably one of the bigger examples is that we've created our Dell Digital Cloud, what we use internally to do a lot of self-service capabilities for our internal development teams and for other teams across the company. And it's kind of fun because what happens is um, our we get asked to talk to a lot of customers about, how are you using the products and what does your IT operation look like? Like basically if you're using it, what are the results that you're getting? And when we do that, sometimes people will say, "Hey, well, how do we get that?" It might be something that we've built internally. And so it was really awesome. We said, "Hey, people keep asking for our digital cloud."
Sure, yeah.
And then the services team said, "Great, we'll productize that." And then they did. So it's kind of great.
That's a good one, exactly. And then the other thread I wanted to pull from your previous answer was the enterprises and the consumers, because Dell has both
Yeah,
customers, and
we have
that's,
both.
we have tech companies that are like, we're B2C and we're B2B. I think Dell's like, no, we're all of the above. And you mentioned developing solutions that work for both.
Yeah,
Could you maybe like dive into some of like the complexities of that? Because I think that is a trickier challenge as another company that also has a B2C and a B2B arm.
yeah.
What are some of those technical challenges that
So
you face?
I think in our not talking about the products, okay, so the product groups will have their own challenges as they think about
Sure.
those different environments of consumer and enterprise. And it's kind of a spectrum from an individual to a small business to a larger business, then to, let's say, a multinational company. But for us, we look at our consumer business it's all about scale, and it's about scale and ease of use, right? Making things self-correcting, making it super easy for consumers to buy and use and replace their devices or any of their equipment. So it's really it's a scale business.
Got it.
And then when we think about our enterprise customers, it's a complexity business, right? Like in the sense of they want things that are highly configured, they want things that will fit into their data center, not just sit on their desktop. So it becomes much more complex, different ways of buying, different sets of products, different levels of service. Um, but I would come back to saying the experience that we have to create for consumers, like most people actually want that in the enterprise too. We all want to have a really great experience. We want things to be super easy to use. We want them to be self-correcting. We just have to operate in slightly different environments. So I think by having both, um, you can get the best of both worlds. You could be a little negative and say, "Oh my God, I have to have the big scale and the complexity," but that's not who we are. On the positive side,
That's
you're
fair.
like, bring consumer experiences to the enterprise. Make it really easy for enterprise customers to do all of those things, and particularly to use the product itself.
I think that makes a lot of sense. How much like thought is put into like making sure it's also built like from enterprise from ground up? Do those things happen simultaneously? Is it sometimes where it's like, hey, we're going to first build something for enterprise and then figure out how it scales for consumer, or vice versa? Like how much is like thinking of both from the very beginning of product development part of the
Mhm.
philosophy at Dell?
That's probably a better question for our product group
Fair enough.
to answer, but I think they honestly think about both all the time. Like on one hand, I just said, hey, people want the consumer experience in the enterprise. And you know what else we find is that consumers want the enterprise experience at home. Like they want to have that level of security that maybe in the past they didn't have. So it's probably a better question for my PG
Fair enough.
colleagues, but I bet you they'd say it's a little bit of both.
Sure, I think so. It's also a little bit easier to not like tack on like enterprise as an afterthought or consumer
Yeah,
as an
yeah,
afterthought. We mentioned it many times, data. Like data, I think is, people make analogies to oil or whatever it
yeah,
wants to be. Dell has a lot of data. Dell is just a massive, massive company in those spaces. And data is also the thing that powers all of AI to some degree.
yeah.
So how are you thinking about like the vast amounts of data that Dell has and like the possibilities of the applications, like particular applications in AI.
So, in areas where we have highly structured data, I mean, the AI applications are really awesome. So, our supply chain team, they're brilliant, and what they've been able to do in terms of predicting and forecasting is it's really great to see. Like, it's great to see. Like, now they're having the computational power that actually brings data to life that we've had for a long time. So that is a huge application. We call it our supply chain modernization effort. And it's very, very powerful. We see the same thing with our finance organization, um, whether they're looking at like how do you detect fraud in a variety of ways. The more data you have, the more examples of good and bad behavior, kind of the easier it is to be able to detect it. But the same thing, they're applying similar techniques for credit and collections. So I think that structured data has been really powerful. The next area for us to really go after is the unstructured data. And, it's like the Wild West. You're like, well, where is that data? What is the data that we want to actually use to train the models? Are those good proposals or bad proposals? Right? Um, but I think everybody sees the power of GenAI, so they're more willing to curate that data now to train models than they ever have been. So I think
Yeah,
that,
I think that's fair. I mean, like, I think if we had this conversation like a year or two ago, I think most people were still just like, how much of a flash in the pan is this? Because
yeah.
the chat GPT moment just happened. It's like, cool. I think now we're at very much at the place where people are like, okay, this is real, something we need to do with it. And I think companies like Dell that have data to just start with is one step ahead there.
Well, okay, I hope so. I
Okay.
hope so. I hope
Okay.
so.
Correct me.
I think where we have structured data, we can be one step ahead because you have great people that understand like how do they build a model, how do they tune a model, how do they look at the results? Like you have to have that, you still have to have that subject matter expertise to be able to have a valuable model.
Sure.
We certainly have that in the date, like when we're looking at our data and doing predictions and forecasting. You'll see, I think one of the other things that has come to light in the last, 18 months is the amount of public data that's used to address issues that might occur on a computer. Like, it's actually super powerful to see, oh my gosh, like, yeah, Reddit has all kinds of suggestions. Some of them are good, some of them are not. But we can now leverage much more of that in a way that we couldn't do before. And then I think there's real opportunities around. I mean, I know what Codium does, but looking at our code base, looking at the defects that have been found, helping us to shorten those life cycles of addressing issues. I think that is areas which we haven't looked at before because it's not just sort of text that we normally think about something written for reading, but text that represents logic and understanding that we can then apply Gen AI to. So I think we've got lots of data in these different areas to be able to apply AI to.
Absolutely. I wish I could dive into more threads, but we've hit the end of this section,
Okay,
so we're
done.
gonna keep moving on.
Okay.
And so we're gonna take, I wouldn't say like a full 180, but change the topic a little bit and talk a little bit about culture, because I think that is another. I mean, we're looking at, first off, congratulations to Dell and everyone here. 40 years
40
is
years. Yeah.
it's 40 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time in any industry, especially the tech industry. I think when I was preparing here and thinking about a company like Dell, I couldn't really think of another company that has been like long enough and has seen both changes at the company, like going back private or the acquisition of EMC that could cause large cultural changes, but at the same time has had a certain amount of consistency through those 40 years as well. So I just wanted to get your perspective as someone who's seen Dell through a good chunk of its time. What are some examples of things that you've like, oh, this has stayed consistent, and these are things that Dell has evolved over time to match the needs of the day?
Um, okay, well, one thing that's really clear and very consistent, what is consistent about the culture of Dell? One that's focused on the customer, one that values innovation, but also one that is operationally rigorous, right? Like those things have remained consistent. And, we're going through a big effort now, which is like, how do we build the processes and the structures, the tools for the next 40 years? And those things remain consistent again, of saying, like, we're always going to have great people. We're going to create a great place to work, but we'll innovate and we will be operationally rigorous as we move forward. Um, I don't know. I think that that is a really big part of the consistency.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And what about the changes? Because as I mentioned, Dell's gone through a number of pretty large changes that most companies could massively shift the culture internally. So how did the culture evolve, or how did it maybe evolve for the better? Like any kind of examples from those times where you're like, oh yeah, this is the culture that we wanted to keep, and this is how we managed to keep that culture going.
I think when we have like large acquisitions, always test your culture, because it's a question of whether or not, like, does one culture dominate, or does, they're always different. And I would say, there's just these core elements about a rigor to delivery that I don't think anything has come in to displace. And most people that like that kind of environment, I mean, at one point we said it was the largest startup in the world, which is kind of fun to think about, because startups are bet on, I mean, it's people betting on their ability to deliver, their ability to listen to customers, and their ability to react.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Yeah, hasn't
For the
changed.
so I think I've heard you talk on in multiple places about aspects of culture that are critical to a technical team. And I think two the words that popped out like repeatedly was innovation and feedback. And I think innovation we've heard a couple of times. Feedback was another one that I've heard a couple of times. So I want to start maybe with the feedback part, and if we have time in the section, we'll go back to innovation. But how can you distill the feedback from 100,000 employees and to understand how direction and process should evolve as a company?
Yeah. Okay. Um, so there's a few different ways of, like, how do you get feedback on what you're doing, what you're delivering, etc. So we do a really simple survey internally. We call it our IT pulse, and we simply say, how is IT supporting you? And you get a score. It was 55. So, like, half the people when I
Out of
started,
100.
out of 100, half the people thought we were doing okay. Like, industry average is about maybe 60. Most people aren't much better than that.
Sure.
And then we just look at, like, well, what is it piece by piece? What is it that is causing is a detractor from that score being higher? And then we address them one by one. Like, you address them so that you can see it's moving. And we do it actually by organization, so that we can see the engineering teams have a little different requirements than the finance team, perhaps. Um, and then we just move that up. So our goal at one point was to be 70. We have been above 75 for the last 3 years. So we just keep
Keep moving.
listening and keep feeding, addressing the feedback of how things have changed. Like, before the pandemic, people thought it was really difficult to schedule a conference room. Then during the pandemic, nobody mentioned the conference rooms, right?
Yeah,
Obviously.
I'd hope
So that
so.
wasn't in our score anymore. It was more about the VPN and scalability. So that's one way. The other way we gather feedback is we actually talk to people. Okay, so we evolved into this product model. Said you just have to own your product. Okay, so if you're writing the software, you're also going to support the software. And when people across the company call in because they don't know how to do something, or they're filing issues, let's figure out what's going on. And the way we were organized before, we had a development team that was separate from, we had like L1, L2, L3. Different team will take the calls. One team will write it, another team will address the issues. Well, that was a terrible feedback loop. Okay, it was terrible because it just was terrible. So we said, you'll be one team, and and all the savings that you get from reducing incidents you can keep, and you can reinvest in development. So the development leaders started calling their most frequent, like, the people who had the incidents most frequently, they started calling them up and said, hey, I just want to know what you're doing. And then they would tell them, and we'd be like, oh, there's like another way you could approach that problem, or that's such a great idea, let's add it to the product. And so in the end, I mean, so we keep doing this. Um, and we have people go watch them, like just go watch them work, go understand what the whole environment is. So it's almost the fundamentals of product management, which is, are you spending time with your end users? Do you have observation on what they're actually doing so that you know that you're continually improving? Because even if you just didn't get any incidents, they might not be using it. And you need to know.
I think it comes back to the customer, like always being customer obsessed as a core part of
Yeah,
the culture, like
right,
setting up the structure so that no one feels like they're removed from the customer. They have to be just fully in the boat with them.
right. Get in the boat.
Awesome. Great. Well, I'm gonna have one last question, then we're gonna have to wrap up this section. So I read an AMA on Dell's website that you did like a couple years ago. So I went back into the archives a little. And there was one quote that stuck out. I'm gonna read it out. It's like, if you don't care about the people you're working with and build those relationships, it's hard to lead them. It's about creating a culture that's not only productive and effective, but also supportive, compassionate, inclusive. So the last question I want to ask is like when it comes to the empathy and feeling as a team as part of the culture, which is harder to do at a scale of 100,000 as compared to a startup. Like, what are some tactical ways that you try to foster that spirit of inclusion and collaboration at Dell?
So, if I thought I needed, I mean, like you can't really reach out and know 100,000 people,
Of course.
So it's kind of simple. It's like as a leader, you should make sure that you care about your team directly, right? And be the leader that you want to work for. That's essentially the essence of it. There's a nice quote that I like that just basically says, people on your team need to know that you care about them personally and that you want to win together. There's a second part. That actually breeds a high performance team. I care about you and we're going to win together. And you pull that, I mean, I don't know. I love it.
Winning's contagious.
It's contagious. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap up this section. And
Okay.
so now we're going to get down to 256 seconds. And
Okay.
so just keep on having it, just keeps on getting shorter and shorter. Uh, so the next section is, we're going to bring it back to AI because, as this kind of podcast, we love AI. We talk about AI all the time. And I think people are kind of sick of it, but we're not. So we keep talking about it. And what I wanted to talk to you is kind of the balance of like the risk versus the potential of AI. And so I think, as someone who's seen multiple tech transformations over the years, how do you compare the risk versus potential trade-off of AI and specifically generative AI with some of those like tech transformations of previous days, like moving your data to the cloud or whatever it might have been before?
There's one huge change, huge difference in all the other, big shifts of technology, right? It's usually for technologists. Technologists are making the shift. With Gen AI, we have all kinds of, let's just say, non-technical people using it, loving it, like, and that can present the risk in and of itself. Is that what's different here is we have a whole bunch of non-technical people involved in technology.
I want to expand on that. There's non-technical people, both as like users, and there's also non-technical people in the sense that they're also creating now product, like it's easy now to create products that leverage this technology as well
Yeah.
without being like incredibly technical there as well. So how do you see like kind of that the risks in both of those avenues?
I think one of the bigger risks that we see is people not recognizing um, where their IP or the company's IP is going when they're using different AI tools. That's really it. And that might not be differentiated by someone being technical or not technical, but just thinking through, it's really about intellectual property and where are you putting it? Where are you making it available knowingly or unknowingly to other sources? I think that's probably when I think about the risk, that's probably the biggest risk.
And that's fair. And I think that's like like the technical risk. Okay, I'm gonna pull out another thing that I read from
Okay.
the internet.
Okay.
This is
I love
2021,
this.
and so this is
Okay.
like obviously in the context of COVID. And there was an article that where you had talked about creating a culture that fosters collaboration and connection. And I think one of the conversations that I often get in with regards to AI is like, is AI bringing us closer together or farther apart? And so, as someone who clearly has talked about collaboration before, I wonder to get your thoughts on where on the spectrum does AI fit, and like generative AI, the potential of bringing people together or pushing them apart is, and how can we make sure that AI is pushed in a way that we stay collaborative?
Okay, I'm definitely in the coming together part,
Okay.
right? In so many different aspects, whether it's taking the drudgery out of the work of a developer or a marketing person. Like, there's a whole bunch of steps that we've asked people to do that are super wasteful and isolating, you know? So I think there's opportunities there. And then, frankly, like for people who weren't very good communicators, they now have like, they really do have an assistant readily available to make them better communicators to bring people together. Like maybe we won't be as misunderstood, you know? Like, I don't know. I guess I would just be an advocate of it'll bring us closer together.
And that's fair. I'm going to play a little bit of the devil's
Do it.
advocate.
Do it.
On the other hand, with something like AI, now people can just like kind of like independently do their own thing. They don't have to like, I think roles probably flex a little bit more. So, do I need to actually collaborate with, a PM to know what I'm developing properly, or any of those kind of things? Like maybe I can just do things more insulated. So maybe that's a forcing function where we won't need larger teams to do things, and that could perhaps push us farther apart. That's maybe like a devil's advocate kind of thing. How do you kind of like view that
Um,
possibility?
I think that that's true without AI.
Okay.
You could have people say, you know what, I'm just going to do this and I'm not going to talk to anybody because for whatever reasons. So I don't think that changes, right? I don't think that changes. I think there's ways though that we can look and say like people, um, people have a need to be with other humans. Just instinctively, I believe that we want to engage with people. We want to have, we want to have conversations. We want to grow. It's an aspect of learning. It's not only using technology, getting our hands dirty, really getting our hands like experimenting, but then having the opportunity to talk to people, understand their learnings, and grow even faster. So maybe it comes back to culture. Maybe it comes back to culture. I don't think it should be pushing people further away from each other, though.
I like the optimistic take. I also am a techno optimist, so I'm very much playing devil's advocate in this myself. So I appreciate it.
It's
Well,
good. That way we won't get blindsided, you know?
I got to stay a little real. Well, I mean, we're already done with this section, so we're going to keep on moving down.
It's
It's
getting
it's, it's
faster.
getting faster. You went to MIT for your bachelor's, for your master's in mechanical engineering, for your MBA. I would have just loved to hear, like, what are some fond memories of your time at Cambridge?
Um, well, I loved it. I mean, I'm not sure I loved it in the moment, but in hindsight, it was I mean, just a great experience of being surrounded by super smart people, all, kind of learning and exploring at a pace that's hard to replicate after being there. And it's a beautiful city. So, I mean, maybe just being on the Charles is beautiful, not Cambridge.
Okay, that's fair. I visited Boston once in the winter,
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah, that's like really miserable and it's super dark, but we're not going to talk about that. Yeah.
that's fair.
Like really, I live in Austin for a reason. Yeah.
I think
It's
that
very dark
that
and
makes. Although right now Austin's also incredibly, incredibly hot. So I don't know. I like either
this is a
extreme.
bad season.
It's a bad
Yeah.
season. I just came
August.
at a wrong time.
Um, Living anywhere else in the world, it seems really weird that August is a bad weather month, but it is a bad weather month in Texas. So anyone thinking about moving should visit in August.
Oh, just
Instead they
see it at
all
its
come
worst.
they all come for ACL in the fall and it's beautiful and then they want to move here and then they do and then August comes.
Oh yeah. I mean, the music scene for sure is good, and I've visited only before in the past. It's my first time here in Austin in the summer, and I'm like,
You're not moving now, are you?
no,
Yeah, I
I'm
know.
for. I think I have to stick in California for sure. Uh, all right. Well, we'll just keep moving then.
Okay, let's
All
go.
right. Next section. So I think this is a classic question now that I've asked pretty much every guest that's appeared on the podcast. But taking it back maybe a year or 2 years now, what was the first experience that you had personally with generative AI, whether it was like ChatGPT or something else, where you were like, oh, this technology is real. Like something's going to come out of this?
Okay. There's probably two examples I'll give you.
All right.
Neither both of which are somewhat embarrassing. So the first one was applying a little pressure to my youngest son about college essays, and I was like, "This thing is a mess. Like, you gotta like sharpen it up a bit." So we leave it, and it's like 10 o'clock. I go to bed, and then the next morning he sent me his updated essay, and I was like, "Wow, I knew it." Knew if he applied himself, I knew he could do it. I was so thankful for all that, liberal arts education I was paying a premium for. I was like, I knew it. And then I thought, it's a little too good to be true. And
I
it
see where this
was.
is going.
And it was. So I was like, damn. But I tell you, there was such a moment of pride first that I was like so proud of him. I was like, damn, that is so good. That's the best I've ever read from him. And anyway, it was totally fake. So that was one that I was like, this is real.
It's very real.
And then the second was um, I was using Copilot and I was like, hey, I need to write this persuasive document. So I gave it, this nice prompt and I walked away. I went outside, I did something, I come back, and it was like pretty good. I was like, wow, pretty good. It's like 5 pages, very nicely structured. That is awesome. Like better than I would have done myself, to be very transparent. And then I said, now make me a PowerPoint out of this. And I went back outside and I came back and I was like, changed my life, man. This is so fantastic.
You can spend your time doing the creative stuff and not
Yeah,
figuring out where
yeah, yeah,
to drag.
exactly. And like the pictures and all that stuff. Like, I think it's so anyway, those are my two
Oh, those
examples.
are two great
Yeah.
stories. That's fantastic. One where you're on the end of like, oh, I got tricked by AI, and the other one was like, oh, I just used AI to like,
Yeah.
everyone else is
Yeah.
like, sees the pretty presentation that I put together.
I don't know if I got tricked by AI. I just had so much confidence in my son that I thought it was him first and then realized
That's
maybe
really
not.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. Well, we're getting to like the short sections now. This
Okay.
is all sub-minute at this point.
Okay.
So I would love to just, kind of hear, as you mentioned earlier, Dell's a global company now. We have offices all over the world. Maybe not particularly offices, but where's like the dream vacation spot? Where have you been in the world where like, oh, I need to go back?
Oh, so Dell, we do business in 183 countries, ship directly to over 120 of them. Dream vacation. Um, I don't know. I just went to Spain. It was fabulous. I'll go again.
Spain's never a wrong answer.
Yeah.
Spain's a great answer. I think me too. I think I've been only to Barcelona once, and that was like 7, 8 years ago. And it's
Need to
like
go back, huh?
always been at the top of my
Yeah.
list and just hasn't had a reason. But
Super fun.
awesome. Okay, moving on. Advice. You know, mentored a lot of people through the years. What is one piece of advice that you would give someone starting their technology career today?
Okay. Um, it's probably not just one piece of advice, but I
That's
would
fine.
say super important to deliver. Be incredibly hungry for knowledge. Like learn, learn, learn. Never stop investing in yourself and build a network. Build a network along the way. And anyone starting out, like if you think about it, like you continue to learn, you deliver, and you're friendly. Isn't that who you want on your team?
It sounds like a recipe to success.
Right? I mean, that's who I would want. So
That's great. Okay, now we're on only sub 10 seconds at this point. So
okay,
we're at the 8-second point.
okay.
I know you're a proponent of sustainable living, and I heard that you live off the grid and you're fully self-sufficient. So what's a sustainability hack that most people might not know?
I don't know. I guess the sustainability hack I'd share is to go to work with wet hair. It's probably working for me.
More current events, the Olympics just wrapped up. So I just want to get your thoughts as someone who's into sports. In a hypothetical world, what's the Olympic sport that you would want to participate in?
I mean, I was gonna say breakdancing, and then I was like, well, now I might have to say men's breakdancing because they did was a little bit more fun, perhaps. But
Why?
since it's
I love the breakdancing
I love it
Olympics.
too, man. It was so awesome. I was like, man, I wish I could do that. So that would be, if they keep it. But if not, Summer Olympics, I don't know. Okay, I'm aging, so I might have to do the Olympic weightlifting.
Easy, easy, easy. All right, 2 seconds. You're a cheese enthusiast. What's the go-to? Guess what?
Extra sharp cheddar all the way.
Extra sharp cheddar. You heard it here first. And one word to describe the state of technology and AI today.
Fire.
Fire. That's a great way to end a fire interview. So Jen, I appreciate you being here and being part of the Floating Points podcast. It was
Thank
a
you.
fun conversation.
Thank you. Great to be here.